Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Roads and Parking Lots on the P&B with your host, Approach Medium. That's right, today, everybody, we're going to be covering everybody's favorite topic. Once again, roads and parking lots on the P&B. No, seriously, this is actually what we're going to be doing today in our paper mill as we continue our work on trying to complete this area. And for some reason, at the moment, my fascination with roads and parking lots is just not diminishing. So I spent a lot of time doing that in this episode, and I think you guys will probably really appreciate what I get completed here and really be interested in it. At least I hope so. That's probably why you're here watching my videos, is because I do some of these really ridiculous and tedious things like this. And I don't know why. I was asking myself this the entire build process here. As you could see, putting all of these road markings down one at a time took quite a while, and it's very tedious, and I did a lot of this episode. But don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with filming every aspect of it. I just show a little bit here in the beginning, and then I kind of do most of it off camera. But the entire time that I was doing this, I'm asking myself, why? Why am I spending so much time working on an area that is not exactly track side or very near adjacent to any tracks? I mean, there are tracks nearby, but this is sort of a background scene, or maybe like a side scene. But for me, these are the type of details that I really enjoy doing, and I guess it's kind of like therapeutic for me in a really bizarre way, to spend a lot of time like working out these lines and doing these little tedious repetitive projects. I don't know why, because I really hate repetitive things, but for some reason this is just like therapeutic to me, and I really enjoy it. And when I finally get done with doing these tedious things, the product is pretty incredible. So I think that kind of makes it worth it for me when I finally get to the end and I can see that these roads just look phenomenal. And I guess for me as a player of this game, or a builder, or whatever you would call it, I don't know, do we really play Trainz? It's not, I don't know. You kind of play with it, I guess, or in my case, I just build with it. I don't think that this is a new thing, like roads that look like this, and parking lots that look like this, and having the ability to make things flow in a really cohesive manner. And this is all new for this game, and for somebody like me who's been with it for a really, really long time, like, I don't know, I started playing this game in 2004 or 2003 with Trainz, Ultimate Trainz, I don't even remember, UTC, I think is maybe what it was. So I've been with this for a long time, and for the longest time, our only option were these spline roads. And I never, ever was happy with the way that those look. I think the traffic on them could use a lot of improvement, and the intersections are terrible, and just the whole lot of it has just been really irritating. So for a long time, I tried to avoid using roads as much as possible, but I've always had this desire to make these complex road networks and like exits and entryways and turning lanes and things like that actually flow like the real thing. And up until now, we couldn't even do that. That wasn't even an option. And sure, this takes a tremendous amount of work. I literally spent my entire day on Sunday, plus another day or another evening prior to that, just doing some of those road markings there. And even off camera, within this episode, I did some revisions. So you'll see in the cinematics at the end that I did have to do some tweaking, because I added a parking lot in one spot and I wanted the flow to be a little bit more ergonomic and whatever. So even then, it wasn't even done when it was done, you know? I just don't know how to stop myself. But I think it just comes from this burning desire to have as much realism as possible in this game, and that's just something that I strive for and that I really enjoy. And regardless of how tedious it can be, the need to have a scene that feels more fleshed out and fully finished and more prototypical is more important to me than covering a lot of ground. And I speak to that as somebody who used to be in the latter of that group, where we always strive to get as much ground covered as possible because we want to run trains, right? That's we're playing with a model railroad, right? So the objective is to get the trains running. And I think a lot of people struggle with this in the real model world and in Trainz as well, where as soon as you get the track laid and you can run some trains, that's all you do. The scenery is just whatever. Who cares? You know, you're running trains, and that's what people want. But for me, I like achieving that sort of degree of realism, and even if I have to focus into a very narrow slice of my route and my map, I really would rather have something that feels more finished than not as finished. And again, like as I had said a moment ago, I wasn't always like this. And if you go back to some of my earlier P&B videos, maybe even just a year ago, I was kind of the opposite. My goal was really just to cover as much ground as possible and to just get the thing done, right? And that stemmed from me just wanting to get it released and having this sort of anxiety of getting it out to the public, because it was my first map to release to the public and I was excited, and I kind of wanted to just get it done. So I was spending a lot of time just trying to cover huge swaths of area to fill as much ground as possible. And now that I revisit some of these areas that I did last year and that are in Phase 1, and after spending a lot of time on the DBEV route, I find that it feels incomplete, and there's a lot of areas that I, again, want to go back to on Phase 1 and slowly, you know, add more details. And the whole town of Allegheny I threw together so quickly, and it shows. To me, like, when I look at it, I'm like, why did I let this go like this? But I guess this is prior to having the ability to even do this degree of road marking and that sort of, you know, like, at the time that I had released P&B Phase 1, there were no road markings like this. I was using, I think it was like an aircraft, not aircraft, it was like runway markings for, like, if you were to build an airport. So they were out of scale, they didn't really look that great, they were kind of bright. So I didn't even have that option, so I was stuck in Allegheny just doing, you know, old school style spline roads, and I threw it together really quick, and I'm not happy with it. But anyway, that's sort of a roundabout way of saying that as little progress as I made actually finishing this paper mill area, I achieved my goal for this episode and just for this region, and that was to get a very nicely detailed and fully fleshed out area. And there's still a lot of things that I want to do in here, namely this rear parking lot. I only sort of started in this episode because as I was building, I got like into the middle of the day on Sunday, and I was like, man, I've been spending a lot of time just in this one section on this one parking lot. Let me move around a little bit and try to add some other details. And of course, the more time that I spend in an area, the more ideas I get for things that I want to add and things that I want to integrate. And of course, I've got Google Earth opened as well, so I'm scrolling around through that and looking at you know, real paper mills in real life and seeing how they're laid out and getting more and more ideas even as I build. And for me, like, once I get into the groove and I get the flow going, it just keeps going, you know, and I'll be working on one area and I'll get an idea for another nearby area, and I'll have to try to figure out a way to rough it in a little tiny bit so that I can, you know, leave the idea there, but, you know, be able to come back to it and revisit that idea. So to sum up that thought, I spend a lot of time focused, I guess, laser focused on an area, and I've been really enjoying it, and but at the same time really asking myself, like, why I'm spending a lot of time on these one little tiny areas, and what that means for me as a sane person, or maybe not, I don't know, but that's just my thought process and what was going on while I was working on this area, and some of the things I was thinking about in the time that I was doing this. Man, I should not have drank apple cider right now. It's making my mouth a little mucusy. It's gross. Anyway, so to talk about what I'm doing, what else I'm doing in this particular build here, aside from the major amount of road markings that I'm throwing all over the place. By the way, shout out to Felix from JR who's made all these road markings, and they're all available on the download station. So if you're looking for them, the QID is in the bottom right hand corner. I get a lot of people that ask me about where these things are located and how to get them. Download station, QID's in the bottom right hand corner. You could also just search whatever it says in the right side. So moving along here, along with this idea that I had with doing a lot of these parking lots and making these roads look a little bit more organic, I had mentioned in the previous P&B episode that I wanted to break up some of these really dense industrial areas with more scenic, like, medians. So that's what that little strip of green is there. And it's tough to really get right. And when you're working on it and you're building it, it doesn't feel right at all. It feels sort of like sloppy, I guess, because when you're working with a 5-meter grid, which is what I'm using here, the texturing on the ground is still not super tight. So you get a lot of this sort of splatter or these polygon edges and stuff like that. You could see sort of a triangle shape in the bottom right corner there, or maybe a hexagon or pentagon, whatever you want to call that shape there. So you end up with a lot of spillage, and that can get kind of irritating, especially when the grass is sort of bleeding out into the road, or when you've got pavement bleeding into the grass. It can get a little irritating and a little bit difficult to work with. But what I've found in spending a lot of time staring at this and trying to make realistic choices here is that that's kind of okay. It's not such a bad thing to have some of the pavement spilling into the grass and into the dirt. It might look a little bit more weird to have some of the grass spilling into the pavement on the road, so it's best to just err on the side of caution of having the pavement maybe spilling into the grass. And it's really not a big deal if you use like a perimeter like what I'm putting down here. So this is sidewalk median 4-foot. You can use any other sidewalk asset that you want. Just something to sort of act as an end cap or a border or some kind of a line to divide it. So even though that there's a little bit of spillage there, it's not going to be that noticeable. And it becomes even less noticeable once you finally start putting some cars down in the parking spaces there and adding grass and shrubs and trees into your little scenic median there, which you'll see in just a moment. Right now I'm trying to get the median in the middle as best as possible. It's really tough to do with just eyeballing it, and especially when you're not working on the grid in the normal grid 90-degree angles. So like right now I'm on like a 45-degree axis or something like that. It makes some things a little bit difficult, particularly texturing and working with roads and stuff like that. But if you spend a little bit of time and you focus, it's not so bad. It's doable. All right, so I have to take a breath here. At this point now I'm adding in like a little substation. In my researches and my Google perusing and that sort of thing, I've noticed that a lot of these places, they're big, man. Paper mills are massive. And they might not necessarily all have substations or like little power plants or anything like that, but some of the ones that I was looking at, the bulk of them have some kind of a substation somewhere in there. And you're talking about lots of power lines and high voltage cable and all sorts of stuff all over the place. And that was like some of the features that I've been noticing in photographs and aerial views and things like that of actual structures and paper mills. So there's a lot of like, you know, what I usually call visual noise. There's a lot of visual noise happening in this shot right here. And I'm not talking just about the spline points, but all of the power lines going all over the place, crisscrossing. I used a variety of power lines here just to get some different what would you call it? Just to mix up the visual style a little tiny bit. Man, it works, but it's really tough to build. If I had to do this again, and my recommendation to you would be to put the power lines in last, because it's so much visual noise that it's actually very difficult to work in here with the wires themselves, and then the shadows that they cast. And like this angle right here was brutal. There was like, it was so difficult to work on some of this stuff. Like, I had to put, at one point I started putting different elements on layers just so I can hide them and get them out of the way. But the visual noise works, especially for low angles and things like that. You got the high tension, high voltage wires, and then some of the lower wires underneath. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't know what each wire is, going to. I can tell you roundabout how many volts each one is probably carrying, based on my background in electricity and stuff like that. But I don't know the specifics of why or where they're all going. So it's just an idea of trying to capture that thematic element and get it into the game, get it into the scene, and break up everything visually. Add a lot of contrast. Mixing this industrial look with some scenic elements, I think, is a really cool thing, and it's something that I haven't necessarily done before. And I'm really liking these shrubs that I found, these STRMM shrubs. Again, I think I mentioned it in the last episode that I don't know if these are new and I just missed them, or if they've been around and I missed them, you know, like, I don't know what, but they look really nice. They've got just the right sort of droopy, drippy texture that I like. They sit really low to the ground and they kind of spread out in different directions. They don't have like a really fixed, solid look to them. So I've been digging them for shrubs, if you kind of like bury them in the ground a little tiny bit. And some of the taller ones look really nice as just like really drippy, sloppy trees, like the one in the top center there, right center. So I've been digging that, and also using the old classic TB grasses. They still look really great. Oh, so I guess the last thing that I should mention here in the last like 2 minutes of this clip is I'm debating. You guys weigh in and let me know. I'm debating on moving this into 19 sometime soon. Just because I started working on the Rochester division in Trainz 2019, and it's a little bit easier for me to work to not have to switch between programs, because I can get all of my assets into one thing, and then I don't have to like think about, oh, well, I got assets in Trainz 2019, but now I'm building in Tane, I gotta go download those, or vice versa. So I might bump this up into Trainz 2019 sooner than I was expecting. I'm just a little bit nervous about doing that because there's going to be a lot of retexturing work and stuff like that that's going to have to get done. But I don't know. You guys can let me know what your thoughts are on that, because I'm split. I'm really divided on it, because I'm afraid that I'm going to be going back over areas and spending way more time than I should trying to like upgrade trees and grasses and stuff like that don't work anymore, because then I could use Turfex, or I could use, you know, the lighting is changed and the grasses look like, you know, shadows and stuff like that. So I just don't want to have to spend a whole bunch of time doing that sort of stupid stuff when I would rather be building. But maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe somebody with a copy of the P&B for Tane from JR will port it into Trainz 2019 and tell me how much of a disaster it is, how much work it's going to require on my part, and give me some feedback and let me know. But whatever, that's just my thought. That's my last thought for this episode. We're going to get into a couple cinematics here. There's not a whole lot to shoot, so keep the cinematics kind of short. But with that, guys, I'd like to thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the last little bit of cinematics, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.